To events in Washington later in the programme, but now it's a week since the Brexit transition period came to an end, with tariff-free trade secured in the EU-UK trade deal. Well, fears of lengthy queues of lorries in Dover have proved unfounded for now. However, some businesses, including food distributors, have found that they still have to pay tariffs in some circumstances. Well, let's bring in Europe's chief executive of cross-border e-commerce agency globally. That's Neil Cushel. Neil, welcome to you. Now, there are a lot of concerns in particular about the so-called rules of origin chapter of the deal with the EU. For the uninitiated, can you explain, please, what that means?
Yeah, of course, and nice to meet you, Ian, and good to be here. So, globally, operate the cross-border e-commerce sales for about 250 UK brands into Europe. And so we've had to prepare for the last couple of years for Brexit. And this rules of origin is one of the parts of that. And effectively, the tariff and trade deal effectively means that if the items can be country of origin UK, there's no duties and taxes. However, for many brands, it's unclear as to whether or not their items are qualifying for UK origin or not. And it's something that brands have to be very aware of.
And the nub of this essentially means that a lot of EU exporters are not necessarily going to be using the UK as a distribution hub anymore.
That is potentially for things like FMCG, that's certainly a possibility. However, for brands that we're working with who are selling cross-border fashion and consumer goods, actually, I'm pleased to say that if they've covered the challenges, of which there are two key challenges, both in paperwork clearance as well as physical logistics, the brands that have prepared well and got it right are not seeing any change in their EU sales in the last 6 days since we've transitioned.
Well, I mentioned in the intro we haven't seen big queues of lorries at the ports yet, but of course, anecdotally, there was a lot of talk that European hauliers were going to give the Channel crossings a wide berth for a few weeks. Have you heard much evidence of that?
So far, there are some carriers who are facing some delays, but generally it's moving in a much better way than was feared in the sort of the pre-January the 1st ways. What's quite important is that some carriers have struggled to continue servicing into the EU, particularly some postal carriers who can't manage duty clearance and delivery duty paid clearances into Europe have struggled. And some carriers are facing delays. So if you're a brand or a retailer that has been wholly dependent on one or two carriers, you could have been impacted. But if you've got a wide network of carriers available to you so you can mix and match between air and road, then actually, as it stands at the moment, touch wood, deliveries into Europe are going okay.
It's really interesting. I mean, I was in the post office the other day and it was brought home to me where there was a sign up which said anyone sending an item to the EU now had to fill out a customs declaration, which I thought was extraordinary. What about... Sorry, do go on.
Yeah, and people in Europe are not used to paying customs duty. So at the point you fill in that customs declaration paperwork in the post office, your consumer or the person who's receiving that item in Europe is likely, if it's not sent as delivery duty paid, is going to be charged the VAT on arrival and potentially customs duty, and they're not used to that. So what's really critical for brands or retailers who are selling into Europe is to absorb all of those additional costs into your product price, send it as DDP, and make sure your consumer in Europe gets a seamless experience that they were used to before. And the brands that are doing that have had no negative impact at all at the moment, which is really encouraging.
Now, obviously, we've got tariff-free trade with the EU, but there are non-tariff barriers, not least a mountain of paperwork to get through. Are UK consumers, do you think, Neil, going to end up having to pay more for goods imported from the continent?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, certainly there's definitely more complexity around it. The question is, do you manage, do brands and retailers take that complexity in-house and deal with it themselves and give their consumers a seamless experience, or do they pass that pain onto their consumers? And the brands that are leaving it to the consumers, I think, are going to struggle because, you know, Joe Public in France or Germany isn't going to be used to dealing with that kind of paperwork experience. And so very much the brands that take that in, deal with the pain, but internalize it and manage a seamless customer experience are doing okay.
Really interesting point on which to end there. Neil, very good to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure.